Welcome to Karma Canvas, the great forest, how the mind creates its own prison. In the sacred teachings of the Yoga Vasistha, we find wisdom that has illuminated the path of liberation for countless seekers across the ages. This is the story of the great forest, a parable so profound that it reveals the very mechanics of how consciousness creates the illusion of suffering. Listen with your whole being, for what you are about to hear is not merely a story, but a mirror in which you may see your own journey reflected. In the hermitage of the great sage Vasistha, Prince Rama sits in humble receptivity, his young mind open to the teachings of Dharma and self-knowledge. The sage, who has witnessed the very processes of creation itself through his divine powers, prepares to share a teaching that will transform the prince's understanding of the world and his place within it. This teaching concerns the nature of the mind, the nature of bondage, and the path to supreme liberation.
O Rama, listen well to these words I share with you. Whatever might have been the origin of the mind, and whatever it might be, one must constantly direct it towards liberation through self-effort and sincere inquiry. The pure mind, free from the chains of latent tendencies, naturally attains the knowledge of the self. Yet the entire universe, with all its apparent complexity, exists within the mind, and therefore, the notions of both bondage and liberation are themselves movements within the mind. In this connection, I must tell you a legend of great power, one which I heard directly from Brahma, the Creator himself.
The sage begins his tale, and as he speaks, the very air of the ashram seems to shimmer and transform. The boundary between listener and story dissolves, and Rama finds himself entering a different realm of consciousness, one where the events of the tale become vividly present, as if unfolding in the eternal now. What follows is a teaching hidden within a narrative, a paradox woven into a parable. In the beginning of this tale, there existed a forest so immensely vast that millions of square miles were contained within it like mere atoms in infinite space. This was no ordinary forest. It was the great forest of existence itself, infinite in its expanse, eternal in its nature. And in this great forest, there dwelt a single being of most unusual appearance. He possessed 1,000 arms and 1,000 limbs, yet he was forever restless, forever agitated, never finding peace or stillness in any moment. In his hand, this 1,000-armed being held a mace of great weight and terrible power. And in a manner most strange and terrible to behold, he would raise this mace and strike himself again and again. Each blow that landed upon his own body filled him with overwhelming terror and fear. Dreading the pain of his own hand, he would flee in panic through the forest, running wildly without direction or purpose, fleeing from himself, from his own self-created torment. In his desperate flight, he would stumble and fall into a blind well, deep, dark, and bottomless, where he could see nothing and find no way out. Trapped in this darkness, filled with terror and despair, he would somehow emerge again. Yet upon emerging, his torment would not cease. Instead, he would take up the mace once more and strike himself again, and again the cycle of beating and fleeing would repeat, driving him into a dense forest thick with thorny bushes and poisonous vines. Yet even in this dark forest of thorns and suffering, he continued his mad cycle, beating himself, fleeing in panic, weeping and wailing aloud in fear and desperation. And most remarkably, there was no other being in this entire vast forest to fear or threaten him. No enemy pursued him. No external force attacked him. He was alone, completely alone, and yet he cried out as if surrounded by countless enemies, as if the very world itself conspired against him.
As I witnessed these events unfold through the power of my divine sight, I was moved with compassion for this tormented being. Through the force of my will and through the power of tapasya, I restrained him for a moment in his endless flight, bringing him to a standstill. And I asked him with gentle concern, "Who are you? Why do you torment yourself in this manner? What drives you to such self-destruction?"
But instead of gratitude or relief, the 1,000-armed being responded with fury and rejection. He called Vasistha his enemy and wept aloud in distress, accusing the sage of persecution. His entire being trembled with rage and fear, and he could not comprehend that the one who had stopped his torment was actually offering him liberation. And then, in a most extraordinary display, he began to abandon his body piece by piece, limb by limb. His 1,000 arms fell away and disappeared, dissolving into nothingness. Yet still his torment continued within his mind.
Immediately after releasing this being, I perceived another person running through the forest in exactly the same manner, beating himself, weeping and wailing in distress, fleeing in panic from his own self-created torment. When I similarly restrained this second being and offered the light of wisdom and compassion, he responded with abuse and contempt, rejecting my help and running away intent only upon his accustomed way of life. And then I came across yet another, and still more countless beings, each trapped in their own unique variation of the same fundamental pattern of suffering.
Some of these beings, hearing the words of wisdom offered to them, recognized the truth and abandoned their previous ways of self-torment. They ceased their beating, they stopped their fleeing, they understood that their enemy was themselves, and in that understanding, they became enlightened. But many others ignored the wisdom offered to them, or even held the sage in contempt, viewing his compassionate intervention as another form of threat. And still others refused to leave their prisons. They chose to remain in the blind well or in the dense forest, addicted to their suffering, unable to imagine any other way of being.
Such is the great forest, O Rama. Such is the eternal pattern that repeats itself in the hearts of all beings. No one in this forest finds a sure resting place, no matter what mode of life they adopt, whether they seek pleasure through sensuality, or power through ambition, or security through accumulation. Even today in this very world, you see such people everywhere around you. And you yourself, young prince, have witnessed and embodied this life of ignorance and delusion. Though because you are young and as yet unenlightened, you have not truly understood what you have seen.
Now comes the revelation, the deep interpretation of the parable that transforms everything Rama thought he understood. Vasistha leans forward, his eyes piercing through the veil of illusion that surrounds the young prince. The great forest, he explains, is not some distant mythical realm in another world or dimension. It is not hidden from view or separated from ordinary experience by vast distances.
This world itself is the great forest, O Rama, the world in which you live, the world you see around you, the world you believe to be so solid and real. This very world is the forest of delusion. It appears as a great void, a seeming emptiness without true substance or ultimate reality. Yet this void can only be perceived and understood through the light of genuine inquiry, through the penetrating wisdom that questions the nature of all things. This light of inquiry is none other than the true I, the self that shines within all beings, the eternal witness of all experiences. The person with thousands of arms in the parable, that is the mind itself, O Rama, with its countless manifestations, its infinite thoughts, its endless desires and aversions. This mind punishes itself through its own latent tendencies, the deep conditioning and samskaras that have accumulated over countless lifetimes. The blind well represents hell, and the banana grove represents heaven. These are the alternating experiences the mind creates for itself through its karma. And the dense forest of thorny bushes. This represents the life of the worldly person, riddled with the thorns of wife and family and children and wealth and possessions, each one pricking and wounding the heart with the pain of attachment and loss. The mind wanders from hell to heaven, from heaven to the human realm, from the human realm back to hell again, forever cycling through experiences, forever seeking satisfaction that never comes. When the light of wisdom shines upon the life of the deluded mind, it foolishly rejects this wisdom, seeing it as a threat and an enemy. Then it weeps and wails in distress, experiencing temporary awakenings where it renounces the world without true understanding, and such renunciation becomes itself a source of sorrow. But when renunciation arises from the fullness of understanding, from wisdom born through genuine inquiry into the nature of the mind and consciousness, then that renunciation leads directly to supreme bliss and liberation. The latent tendencies, like the limbs of that person in the story, vanish completely from the mind of the one who wisely renounces, not from force, but from understanding. Behold the play of ignorance that causes one to hurt oneself through one's own volition, which makes one run hither and thither in meaningless panic. Though the light of self-knowledge shines eternally in every heart, yet one wanders driven by latent desires. When one who gains wisdom preserves it for a long time and persists in the practice of inquiry, sorrow no longer touches them. The uncontrolled mind is the source of all sorrow. Yet when that mind is thoroughly understood through direct investigation, the sorrow vanishes like mist dissolves at sunrise. You are not that suffering being, Rama. You are the light of consciousness itself, the eternal witness that observes all movements of the mind. When this truth is known, the great forest itself disappears, and there remains only the infinite consciousness, whole, complete, and eternal peace.
The teaching: the mind creates its own suffering through identification with false notions, and liberation comes through the light of self-inquiry that reveals the eternal, undivided consciousness underlying all existence. Subscribe to Karma Canvas for daily wisdom from ancient spiritual traditions.